There is no one right way to host a podcast, and no one knows that better than today's guest, Lorraine, who has been podcasting for over 15 years. I am so excited to share Lorraine with you. She is an absolute gem. She has so many gold nuggets to share with us. We talk through her journey into podcasting, how she's tried different formats to find what works best for her. We talked about what makes a bad guest. So, as a host, that is important as well. Understanding how to make sure that you show up as a good guest while you're growing your show, but then also to filter through some of the people that might not be good guests. We talk about co hosting. We talk about ways to repurpose your show. We talked about ways to repurpose your guest episodes. This episode is chock full of so much value. Please join me in welcoming Lorraine to the podcast. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alesia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello, Lorraine. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. If you could start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and a bit about your show.
Well, thank you so much for the invite. I'm so excited to be here. I love talking about podcasting. Let's break it down. I love talking, which explains why my podcast is called More Than a Few Words. I started podcasting back in 2010. Actually, it was late 2009. An intern walked into my office and said, you like to talk. You should have a podcast. And I was like, what is a podcast? We went on this journey and we explored it and started it. I took the name from what had been my personal blog, More Than a Few Words, and thought, well, that works. It fits. And so we launched. I learned a lot along the way. When we first launched, I did a mixture of if somebody came into my office, I whipped out my phone and we recorded a quick conversation, to doing 30-minute call-in shows, kind of like call-in radio. Let me tell you, that is a stupid idea. It's because you have to juggle so many balls. You don't know, are you going to have calls? Aren't you going to have calls? Will the calls be serious? I mean, radio stations have screening for this. They have people pre-clearing those calls so you don't get wackadoodles. I did not have that. Oh, yeah. So we stopped doing that, but we were still doing live shows. And one of the things that we did, because it was the way the world was at that time, we had a live Twitter feed during the calls. I had somebody on my team who was in real time interacting with people on Twitter. And it was fabulous because we were doing Facebook Live before Facebook Live was a thing. That's essentially what we were doing with those live tweets. And we built a really great community. But two things. Number one, live is exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And Twitter has changed. So we move on from that. The other thing I moved away from that I did in the beginnings, I was very locked into 30 minutes because that's what radio programs were. But the beautiful thing about podcasts is you're not tied to that. You can go as long or as short as you want to go. I ultimately settled on roughly 10 minutes, More Than a Few Words, designed to be quick marketing tips for small business owners who do not have time for a 30-minute show. They're listening in the car between meetings. They're waiting for someone to show up at a coffee shop. And if I can drop 10 minutes of info on them, it's a win-win. And so that's really where the show is now. I was doing the little 1-minute marketing tips, and I think you've done some quick solo episodes too. And I loved those, but after 3.5 years, I probably have 5 years of marketing minutes. I kind of have covered a lot of it. And I did a listener survey, and I was like, well, what do you want? And one of the things that came up was, we'd like to hear more entrepreneurial stories. In February, I launched What Went Wrong. They are conversations with people that I've had on my show before, so I know good energy, good interviews, and I also know that they'll be open about the mistakes. We spend a lot of time giggling and laughing and like, oh God, I can't believe you did that. And I've really enjoyed it. As my husband said when I first told him about the idea, he said, if it doesn't work, the last episode can be what went wrong with what went wrong. So far, I think it's fun and I think it's going to be around for a while. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, my podcast journey.
Wow. Like you really nutshelled 15 years. Launching a podcast then was completely different than it is now. I don't think people understand what went into launching then, where you actually had to like kind of understand RSS feeds. There weren't places like Buzzsprout or Libsyn where we could easily just upload it and everybody else gets it. It was not like that at all. And you had that experience from blogging too, right? I think blogging gave you that foundation of understanding the techie side, especially around then, because there weren't a lot of softwares available to bloggers. I'm thinking about when I started my very first blog, it was maybe 2010, 2011, and just doing it for fun and then launching my website in 2015, I think, and then starting listening to podcasts around that time and was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed. So just thinking about how much this tech has evolved over the years is really interesting. Did the tech side feel really daunting for you, or did you have someone that could help you?
Well, several things. Number one, I'm a geek. So I do like the tech a little bit. So I like playing in the tech. Secondly, it was my intern who brought this to me, and he says, don't worry, I'll do all the research. And he found us a nice hosting solution. You'll notice the official launch date of this podcast is January 3rd, 2010. But the truth is, we actually had episodes in 2009 on this cheap hosting platform that went away. We didn't lose the episodes because we had the audio files, but I had to relaunch them. We experimented with Blog Talk Radio. That's how we did the live call-in show. And it was fine for that, but it wasn't good for distribution. I found in 2010 Podbean. And I know there are a lot of alternatives now. And every now and then somebody will be like, oh my God, Lorraine, you need to go to this, you need to go to that. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I have 1,100 episodes. Oh, but you can move them. Yes, but I link to all of them. I have thousands of links. And you know what? I'm going to stay with Podbean. They have been a really good partner. I think Stitcher's interesting. I think Spotify is interesting. Anchor. I'm just not going anywhere.
Yep. And they've been with you so long, right? Too. Like, I'm the same with Buzzsprout. I started with them and I met some of the people that worked there at an event I went to. Was like, I love you guys, never leaving. Their customer service is fantastic, right? So, like, we all have our own preferences, and that is okay. And I think that's the whole point of this show, right? Is that there's no one right hosting platform. You get to decide which one's going to work best for you. And if it's going to be a headache, or a heartache to move, then stick with what you're enjoying and what's working, right? If it's not working, that's different.
Yeah, my first solution was not working and we did have to move, but this is working and I can publish an episode in my sleep. 15 years of using the tech and I know how it plays with the other platforms. Do I put up with some of the flaws? Yeah, because for the most part, it does what I need.
Yes. So you mentioned you had that call-in style show. There were all these different ideas. How did those kind of evolutions happen? I've seen it happen with our clients as well as myself. We get to a point where, for me, it's the new year. And I'm like, what do I want the podcast to be like in this next year? Yes, the content is still going to be the same, but what shifts do I want to make? So, for example, in 2024, I did almost exclusively guest episodes because I had the other podcast, Successful Podcasting Unlocked, where it was just me answering podcasting questions. So that was weekly, with like a limited series for 52 weeks. But like having to do solos there plus solos on here just didn't really make sense. And so I did mostly guest episodes on here. Then going into 2025, knowing that Successful Podcasting Unlocked was pausing and stopping, how can I show up really well over here? And so saying, okay, every other week is going to be a solo from me because I know my audience loves to hear from me. I love talking to my audience. I tried the 10 minutes or less. it is difficult for me. I'm like, wait, I didn't cover everything. I have more stories. 20 minutes or less I can do. Those are better for me. And so being able to shift the direction just slightly really helps me to not get bored with my show, right? Which I think is such an important part that if you're just like, no, it has to be the same way every single time, boring. How did those shifts and evolutions happen for you?
So very few of those shifts and evolutions happened at the beginning of the year. That would be logical, right? For us, for me in the early days, I had a number of employees that did episodes with me. I did a lot of the guest episodes. I had one woman who was working with me, and Allison was my co-host for, I think, 2.5 years. In the beginning, the two of us would interview the guest. And we ran through a series of terrible guests. Back then, it was all audio, and we didn't have the video interface, so we could make faces at each other. And we got off the call from one, and she said, we can't do that anymore. She said that, yes, we've had some wonderful guests, but we've had some terrible guests. And she says, I think we have enough to say. And
Mhm.
so I'm like, well, I have 3 more people scheduled. We'll get through those, and then it'll just be us. And we did that for 2.5 years. And it was great. We have a really good rhythm. Even though the sound quality on those shows is not as good as what I have today, every now and then I'll pull one of them out because the content is really good. Allison moved on, and the person that replaced her on my team, I did not feel like the energy on those episodes was as good.
Mm.
And so I kind of lost a little steam. I did a little pod fade, didn't release a lot of episodes for about a year. I had a few, but not many. And so when I came back with a totally different approach where I'm like, okay, if I'm going to bring this back, the time was right. I had this much larger network of marketing professionals who were also presenters. I knew they would be good. And that was the rebirth. And that might have been, I don't know, by then it might have been 14 or 15. And I really stayed with that for a while. Then somebody else walked into my office and said, Amazon is doing this daily update thing. I said, really? And they're like, yeah, it's kind of a morning brief. So we launched just a few words, which was a 1 minute. You think 10 minutes is hard. And we kept it 59 seconds. I mean, it was tight. And the idea was I would do that every day. Well, do you know that's exhausting? Every day? I don't know how long we did it, but we didn't really get a lot of speed. It didn't catch on.
Right.
And I must have had 35, 50 of those. And I came in and I said, this is not working. It's crazy. It's not sustainable, but I don't want to lose the content. So I started re-releasing, and that's something I want to talk to you about with your success on successful podcasting, unlocked content. I started re-releasing those on Sunday morning in the More Than a Few Words feed. And then I caught my breath. Every now and then I'd have a rant about something. I would do it because I was no longer trying to hit that 1 minute mark for Amazon. If the marketing minute went a minute and a half, it's my show. It's
Yep.
going a minute and a half this week. I think that's an important lesson. Put constraints on your podcast because you think they're the right constraints, but understand that you can flex because it's your show.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. Okay, I have lots of questions. So, co-hosting. I know from experience, having co-hosted a show with my sister, co-hosting is such a rewarding experience, but it can also be really difficult. And we've had people on to talk about their co-hosting experiences. What is just one thing that you would either warn people about or advise people on if they are co-hosting? One of the things that people tend to say is communication. It's so important. But what would you say?
So I actually do co-host a show on Friday mornings with a friend of mine. It started as a Clubhouse chat, and it's just taken on a life of its own. I would say communication, definitely having clear outline of you're going to do this, I'm going to do that. But also make sure that you have a good rhythm. I may really like you, but are we interesting to listen to when we talk to each other? Allison and I had a really good rhythm. We were both very sarcastic, and there was an unstructured tone to the conversation that isn't necessarily my style anymore. I go for a little more polished. I mean, this is not really polished, but I go for a little more polished. I don't know that I would enjoy that as much anymore, but too many people love the person they're talking to, like your sister, and you get off on tangents and you're having fun. But if I don't really know you, I feel like an outsider in the party. And I think
Right.
that really is a flaw in a lot of the partnership and co-host relationships where you like each other, but there's too much inside baseball and the audience doesn't get you. So,
Yes.
you got to figure some of that out and figure out roles. Sometimes I would have a member of my team on, like, look, I really want to talk about this. I want you to be interviewing me, even though normally I'm the host, and getting very clear when I do the Friday show with Jen, if it's a topic that she really knows, I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about this. I'm going to ask questions. The next week, she'll be asking me. And then the next week, we'll have a topic that we both know a lot about, but we disagree. So there'll be fun, lively conversation. With all due respect to my colleague,
Right.
and then we have some fun with it.
I love that. And I think the inside jokes thing is really important, especially when you know each other really well.
Mhm.
I had someone on another podcast that I host. On there, I had two co hosts of a different podcast. They have a bookish podcast, and I wanted to have them on to talk about the library and the power of the libraries. It's so important in our society. They were making a joke about the smell of new books. The other co-host started laughing really hard. They were giggling, and then the person said, "The reason that she's laughing so hard is because I don't like the smell of other people's, like, lotions and hands and stuff on my paperbacks. So when I get them from the library, I like to get them when they first arrive. Otherwise, they have that weird other people's hands smell." We all started laughing because we got the joke, right? So it could just be as simple as explaining it, right? You don't have to dumb down your fun or your like inside jokes. You just sometimes have to explain it.
And I think, letting people in on the joke. And again, I've heard shows that have two co-hosts that I just love listening to. And then they have others where I get impatient because they're having so much fun talking that they forget they've made a promise to their audience that they are going to provide some kind of information, something that I'm really listening for. The very best co-hosts are the ones that I fall in love with because they manage to deliver the information and just enough personality that I'm like, I like you. I know you. I'm going to stalk you on Instagram and find out what you had for breakfast because we're friends and you don't know it.
I've had people get on calls with me and say, like, "We're best friends. You don't know." It always kind of weirds me out, but also I'm like, "All right, where's my crown?"
The very first time I had that experience was years ago. I mean, decades. I was doing marketing for heating and air conditioning company, and I had been reviewing footage of the winners of this award and the interviews with all of them. By the time I was done, they didn't know me. And my first introduction was a dinner party. I wanted to walk up and hug them, and they're like, who the heck are you? I'm like, oh no, you don't understand. I know you.
It's like sometimes you gotta be like, "I'm awkward. It's okay."
Yeah. I was just on somebody's podcast and I had been following him for a long time. I had actually applied twice to be on his podcast and he completely ignored me. Then we met in a small online networking group for podcast hosts. As I knew we would, we really connected and clicked. So here I am on his podcast and I'm fangirling in my head. And he has no idea.
So the other thing you mentioned that I wanna touch on is bad guests. What are some things that make bad guests, right? So, like, people who are listening, I always say the number one way to grow your podcast is to be a guest on other people's shows. We don't wanna be bad guests. So
Yeah.
how can we make sure that we are not bad guests?
Well, the good news is I've learned how to read pitches and I tend to eliminate a lot of the bad guests based on the pitch. If the pitch is 4 paragraphs about you, you're not going to be on my show. The show's only 10 minutes. You got 20 minutes worth of content in your pitch. I'm looking for guests, and I think good guests come into a podcast conversation understanding it's a collaboration, understanding that we're going to work together to create a conversation people want to listen to. We are going to work together to promote the conversation when it's done. We're going to work together to be clear on what the audience is, what you're trying to deliver. The bad guests are the people that come on and decide that they need to pitch their product or service. On my podcast, I always tell my guests at the end of the show, I will drive traffic to your website unless you have a different link you want. You don't have to mention it. It's going to be way more meaningful coming from me, and I'm going to have it in the show notes. The worst is the guests that either pitched a topic, but the title has nothing to do with what they really want to talk about.
Mm.
And so you're in the middle of this interview, you've done the setup, and it just goes completely south. Bad guests are boring. If you're boring, record yourself and then make 3 people who are not your family listen to it and let them tell you if you're boring or not. Bad guests don't come up for air, and I feel like I'm being a little bit of a bad guest today because I'm rambling.
You're good. I love it.
The reality is, especially now, as everybody is trying to do the reels, you've got to give the host 50-second sound bites. Come up for air. Let them ask the next question. Make it a conversation, and then promote the crap out of it once it's published.
Yes, that one. I'm telling you, it always baffles me the number of times that podcast guests just don't share. I know my clients struggle with it constantly. I'm like, did you send them assets? Did you give them everything you possibly could? Did you invite them as collaborators? How much information have you given them? That's obviously an important part as hosts, but as guests, there are so many ways that we can take that and make that into something more, even if it's simply saying, hey, I was on this podcast to your email list, or posting it on LinkedIn and tagging the host, right? There's just simple ways that you can do that to amplify the message and really get it out to everyone. And then they're going to be more likely to have you back because they saw that you gave that episode some love.
Absolutely. Now, I will tell you that when you record really far out, because you work ahead, one of the challenges is that by the time you release the episode, the guest has forgotten who you are and what you're about. And so as a host, this is a good tip, is pre-release some of those shorts. I started doing a fun little screen grab with a coming soon that I send to my guests. I'm like, hey, if you want to share this to let people know you're going to be on this podcast and create more ongoing dialogue. I also do this both as a guest and a host. I do roundups. I was on 5 podcasts in December. And so I did a post that said, hey, I've been sitting in the guest chair. Here's where I was. And I linked to all 4 of those shows. So it introduced my community and kind of that back and forth. People who listen to my podcast probably will enjoy. And then on the other side of it, if I've had a great conversation with somebody on podcasting, I'll do hey, if you're thinking about a podcast, here's 4 conversations that are just crammed full of stuff you need to know. And I bundle them that way. And then again, these hosts get to know each other.
Yes, I love that. For me personally, I have my team because they send the email because otherwise I will forget. And so it's like it needs to be on somebody else's to-do list. And so my team sends the email saying, hey, your episode on the podcast is live. And then I have a section on the template that says, if you forgot what we talked about, here are a few of the bullet points, because I get it. Like, we're months out from the episode going live. I don't remember what we talked about. It was months ago. So here is quick, easy ways to remember, as well as the blog posts. You can read through the full-length blog and see what exactly we talked about too. I love these roundup ideas. We're all looking for social content that we can pull together and create. Now, I know you kind of teased it a little bit, so I want to at least give you the opportunity to tell me what your idea is for Successful Podcasting Unlocked, those 10 minutes or less. That way the listeners aren't like, wait, you didn't let her say that thing. I wanted to hear it. So what is your tip?
I believe in reusing your content. I think one of the mistakes that podcasters make is they think that was an episode from 2 years ago. And I got news for you. You have people who subscribe and download, but you have a relatively small number of people that have listened to every episode. And so don't be afraid of re-releasing. I do this year I have too many new episodes, but I typically do one every other week from my archive. I got 1,100 from my archive, and I would take all of those successful, unlocked, maybe add a 10-second intro that just says, hey, if you missed unlocked, here's one of our episodes. I would drop those once a week to round out your schedule, to buy you some time, and to introduce a different audience to that exact same wonderful content.
That is a great idea. I think I might have to use that because thinking about the direction that I want the show to go in, being able to guide people towards lower ticket resources. I have the agency side. Those are for people who don't want to do their podcasting. They just want to show up, record, have somebody else do the rest. Yes, we do that. But for people who are like, I just want to know what to do next. I can't afford, someone to do it all for me, but I just need guidance to have resources for them. I just talked to someone this week who, she's like, oh, I love your episodes and I especially love your solo episodes. And I was like, have you listened? I have 50 something episodes on the other podcasts that are all solos, 10 minutes or less. And she was like, let me write that down. I think just funneling them over to here would be a great idea, just to be able to have that information duplicated in a way so people can get it, because there's tons and tons of value in those episodes.
So when you make $1 million on that, I guess.
Yes. You get a finder's fee for that. Lorraine, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being on. If you could tell everyone where to find you, stalk you, hang out with you, all that fun stuff.
So if you've enjoyed this conversation, hop over to morethanafewwords.com. You'll find hundreds of conversations just like this, workbooks, white papers, and resources to help you grow your small business.
Oh, perfect. Lorraine, thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a blast.